Beautiful.
Hello, lovers of the world. This is Cinta speaking. I love listening to new music. It's really fun to find new things to obsess over, whether that's a new album, a new artist, or a new song. I'm always trying to chase that sense of joy and triumph of finding something new to love. It's the beginning of the month, so it is once again time to reflect and rank every musical project that I listened to in the last month of April. So I know it's already the middle of May. Things have just been so busy, in fact, that I did not even have the time to film these videos the way I usually do. Between juggling my jobs, my studies, my social life, and getting ready to go overseas, I don't really have the bandwidth to film myself as I usually do, so I am experimenting with this new format. But otherwise, everything else about this video should be pretty normal. We are back on the same tier list, but obviously with new additions to rank. So for those who are not familiar with the format, I like to keep all of the things I have listened to in the past in the same list so I can compare them more easily with everything that I listen to from this point onwards. And usually before I rank, I explain my tier list rules and the grading system behind it, but to save us some time, I've decided to omit them in this video. Hopefully the tier names are self-explanatory enough that you can still follow along, but if you want to know for sure what the tier list system is like, you're welcome to watch last month's music review video where I did explain the system. Just for the record, my reviewing style relies entirely on how I feel about an album. I don't have any musical theory background, so for me, it's all straight up vibes. If I know nothing else about music, I at least know how it makes me feel. And for those who want to skip ahead to the projects that they want to listen to, I've put the timestamps in the description to indicate when I start talking about which album, so you can skip to those if you want to do that. But now that that's out of the way, let's get into what I listened to in April. So this is in the order of when I listened to each musical project. In the beginning of the month, I listened to Under Soil and Dirt by The Story So Far. So this was released in 2011. The Story So Far is an American pop punk band from California formed in 2007. This is their debut album. To be honest, I have my algorithm to thank for this one because I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and I came across this old live performance of the band performing High Regard, and I felt the past throw a bucket of cold water over me. You know how sometimes you just know a song without really knowing more of the band? That was me with High Regard. I first came across this song as well as Rome on Tumblr, which is actually where I used to get my music recommendations from. I used to listen to High Regard and Rome and Mount Diablo a lot during my teenage angsty emo years, but as all teenagers do, my connection to these angstier, angrier songs kind of faded over time as I grew up. So I haven't heard or even thought about this band or these songs in literal years. And interestingly enough, this album was released in 2011, which was the year that I migrated to New Zealand, and I was 12 years old back then. Time really does fly. And it felt really right to rediscover the band again after probably 9 or 10 years. I've obviously changed a lot since the first time I've listened to the songs, but what surprisingly hasn't changed is how much I really love the music. Again, I only knew a few songs from this album and from this band. This is the first time I've listened to the album in full, but it was clear that this is the exact flavor of pop punk sound that I really love. And you could argue it's probably because I heard it during my formative years or that there's a sense of nostalgia to it. But no matter what the reason is, I find that this is actually a very no-skip album for me. So in my head, I've categorized this album to a label that I've made just for myself called The Silly Rabbit Planet. So what the hell does that mean? It's a reference to this meme joke video.
I'm Mr. Sterling's right-hand arm, man. I'm Mr. Sterling everything. I'm his confidant, his best friend, his silly rabbit.
His what?
His silly rabbit.
His silly rabbit?
Yes.
Is that what he calls you?
No.
And I personally use it as a shorthand, affectionate name for something that even though I can recognize the flaws or the shortcomings of, I can't help but defend or make excuses for it in some way because I like it. So basically, I am their silly rabbit. To be honest, the only real, valid, and most important critique of this project would be the misogyny in the lyrics. I think anything else could be chalked up to personal taste, but misogyny in the pop punk space voice is well documented, and this project is no exception to that. It's the clearest in the track Daughters, but to be honest, that's the only one from the album that really struck me as more misogynistic than usual, than expected. Of course, the song is clearly based on the singer's personal experience and heartbreak with an ex-girlfriend, and if it just left it at that, then I would have given it the same level of plausible deniability that I usually afford to other songs from this era. However, the fact that the song lyrics directly ties the singer's anger and vitriol to the lover's gender, that's kind of where it goes into territory that's hard to ignore or think about in any other way, when not just the title but also the chorus doesn't really let you forget that this is the thesis of the song. Hopefully I'm explaining myself well enough, but to be honest though, I've been kind of desensitized to this level of misogyny, not necessarily through any intention of my own. It's just when you listen to enough music, you can kind of just get used to anything. And the lesser criticisms I have of the album would be maybe the album's lyrical or narrative thesis can be one note, like all of the songs are basically about this one breakup and really not much else. And then maybe you could say the singer's vocals are like just averagely good, nothing too outstanding. It gets the job done. It's not bad, but it's not something that you'll remember forever. The scream sing style conveys the right feelings of the album, but it's not like it's a once in a generation voice. However, I actually find that the album nonetheless is very cathartic when I listen to it. I really like how the singer Parker Cannon's delivery really calcifies this cocktail of anger and hurt that could only come from being young and going through a life-defining breakup. Usually pop-punk bands, especially those consisting of younger members, will cover the classic themes of heartbreak, mental illness, and possibly fear for the future, all of which you can kind of see in the album. So again, nothing that really shakes the foundations of the genre, but it's such a solid standard for what you can expect from pop punk that I really appreciate it for what it is. My favorite songs are Rome, Placeholder, Closure, High Regard, and Mount Diablo. So, a good chunk of the album I actually really enjoyed, and a lot of the tracks I had put in my heavy rotation. So, I'm gonna put this in French Toast. And then I listened to Seasons by Ray. This was released in 2025. Ray is a Japanese idol girl group that formed in 2019, and they predominantly release shoegaze and other shoegaze adjacent genres. Very interesting, especially if you see their live performances. They are basically like an idol group, but the music they release is just not what you expect from an idol group, so I find that very compelling. I've liked a lot of their songs before, but I don't often complete an entire project of them, so I think I'm going to start doing that from this point onwards. This is their latest EP. It's a very short project with only 4 tracks, but boy, do those 4 tracks pack a punch. I find that there isn't much to say about the project because of how short it is. Each song is very well made. I think the girls sound really amazing. I'm definitely putting this in year-end list material, despite maybe not having necessarily an overarching narrative again, as is with shorter EPs like this, but I really enjoyed it. And my favorite song is Sunset Hurts. I think it's the best track of the EP for sure. And then I listened to Handmade Sunrise by Verbana. This was released in 2025. Verbana is an independent musician that my friend recommended to me and whom he had found on Instagram. Sometimes the algorithm works in our favor. I really enjoyed this album. I don't really know a lot about Verbana because, again, it was just recommended to me, and judging from his social media, he's kind of just like an independent musician putting his music out there. I found this to be a really excellent debut that feels like a collage of everything Verbana, the artist, loves. It has this bricolage scrapbook feature that I've been finding to be one of the most defining characteristics of this postmodern music landscape that we live in. People have always wanted to put what they loved and their influences in their work, but with the world at our fingertips, people's music tastes have gotten so much more eclectic than they might have been maybe 5 or 10 years ago because they are just that much more exposed to so many different music styles and genres. And in turn, they get even more creative with how they want to put all of the things that they love in their music. And it does help that all of the genres that Verbana is influenced by are all genres I already love so much. So it's definitely a no-brainer to find that I resonated with his work so much. I found this album to be deliciously overwhelming, and absurdly unique. I'm definitely putting this in your endless material. And then I listened to Air by Yeji. This was released in 2025. Yeji is a South Korean singer from JYP Entertainment and is a current and active member of the K-pop idol group ITZY, which debuted in 2019. However, this year, Yeji has officially debuted as a solo artist. I've been following ITZY for a long time, so I was quite excited to see what Yeji had to offer as a soloist, especially since it's been sort of teased in the most recent album that they released, I think in 2024, Born to Be, had a Yeji solo alongside the other members' solo. So I knew listening to her song then that she would make for a really charismatic figure if she ever did pursue a solo career. And I was proven correct. I really enjoyed the EP. I don't like that it only has 4 tracks, but what can you do? I always find EPs that are only 4 tracks to be way too short, especially even for a genre like K-pop. But it makes up for the fact that out of the 4 tracks, I really like 3 of them. It's a great grade, but again, I feel like they also only picked songs that Yeji sounded amazing in, and there's no indication of intentionality otherwise. It feels like they selected demos that they were like, okay, Yeji will sound good in this, without really considering a larger narrative or a larger thesis or a larger story. And to me, at this stage, a level of intentionality is the bare minimum, especially if, like, for a project is short, maybe you'll feel differently. Maybe you're like, oh, it's a short project, you don't really need to have a big message, but I have different expectations for K-pop. Given that it's really short, the highest I can really put this in is Gems Found in the Mind. But my favorite tracks are Air, Invasion, and 258. Basically all of them except for the 3rd track, which ironically enough sonically reminded me of ITZY's usual girl crush sound, which I'm actually not particularly fond of, and I understand why they put it in the EP, so usual fans of ITZY can gravitate towards something familiar. I just gotta say I wasn't really a big fan of that one. So yeah, Gems Found in the Mind. And then I listened to Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morisette. This was released in 1995. Alanis Morisette is a Canadian singer-songwriter that released her first album in 1990. I chose to listen to Jagged Little Pill because Haim had just released their 2nd single, Everybody Wants to Figure Me Out, for their upcoming album, and I really, really loved the song. So I was kind of craving more of that messy rocker girl vibe, and Alanis Morissette's album had been on my to-do list for a while, so I thought that it was the perfect time to tackle this very acclaimed and very well loved album. It was also a plus for me that this album is 30 years old as of 2025. Isn't that crazy? Like, this is Morissette's 3rd studio album, but it's safe to say that this is probably her most popular one, and it's easy to see why. When you look at the track listing, 6 out of the 13 songs are hit singles. That's how you know the album is a certified hit. I am so impressed that she wrote all of these as a 19-year-old, but at the same time, I'm also not surprised. I can totally believe that a 19-year-old wrote these songs because they display this gripping, sardonic attitude mixed with a startling, charming naivete and petulance that could only have sprung from this specific intersection of maturity and childishness. Not quite an adult, not quite a child anymore. Her intensity is very palpable, like she knows all the secrets of the world, but at the same time, she doesn't know what she'll feed herself for dinner or how to use the laundry machine. It's the kind of album that I really need right now. It's incredibly comforting to find an album that I feel like understands me and what I'm going through, and that someone has felt the way that I'm feeling now and managed to push through the turmoil many years later. It gives me hope. I wish more girls listen to this because Alanis Morisette is low-key the foundation in which a lot of these current female singer-songwriter pop girlies are built on. Taylor Swift, Gracie Abrams, Olivia Rodrigo, even Tate McRae to a certain extent. And I'm not saying that Alanis Morisette is better than the girls. That's a completely different conversation. I listen to the pop girlies too. I just feel like when I listen to this album, a whole new world has completely opened up to me. I think it just hits different when you click with an album older than you. It makes you feel like everything will be okay. You know, like, okay, someone has felt the same way I did 30 years ago, and 30 years have passed and that person is probably feeling something completely different. It makes me feel a little bit safer about what the future might hold. And I also really love that the album isn't just about love songs, which I fear that a lot of the pop girlies are focusing way too much on love, and that kind of irks me. I feel like maybe this focus on romance is getting a bit too tiring, and I really want people to tap more into the rich inner world I know they have in them. Another appeal of Alanis Morissette I found is her willingness to just sound completely different and unique to everyone who's doing their thing. Her very effective vocal delivery is so recognizable and so cathartic when you sing the song, because when you're singing her songs, you end up copying her way of singing, and you end up feeling so playful and, cheeky when you do so. And it's a lot more engaging as a listener when it feels like you're participating almost in the same performance as the singer, if that makes sense. This way of singing is how she sings for most of her songs. So when she decides to not sing for storytelling, when she does, if that makes sense. So I'm mostly talking about the track Perfect. It's really obvious that the song is about a child and their complicated relationship with their parents. But actually, in my first listen, I assumed the song was also trying to introduce a gendered dynamic commentary with a son or a daughter. So if you look at the first verse, it's sung softer, and the chorus that follows it is "Be a good boy," with the rest of the chorus not being as harsh, a little bit more encouraging compared to the second verse that is clearly has more frustration laced in the lyrics, and for the delivery to be more animated, and for the chorus to say "good girl." To me, it was easy to interpret it as a song that showed the difference between how parents treat their daughters and their sons. Let me know if you feel the same way or if you interpreted it the same way, but I really like how I came to that conclusion. So for now, that's my truth. The other song that I absolutely love, I think hands down, it's my favorite song of the album. It's Hand in My Pocket. I've always found the song very catchy and sweet whenever it came on the radio, but listening to it in the context of the actual project and thinking about the time period that it came out of and trying to understand the world that existed before and after this album came out, and for it to still make sense and click with me decades later, for it to connect so strongly and viscerally, is a real testament to the quality of the songwriting. So those two are definitely my personal favorites, but as I said earlier, the other 4 songs became charting singles for a reason. So I really, really enjoyed this, and I really, really recommend this to basically every girl out there, honestly. And if you're a guy or a non-binary person, go ahead and listen to this too. Maybe you'll relate, but something about this just speaks to this kind of girlhood that I envision in my head. So I'm gonna put this in French toast. And then I listened to Kylie Minogue's self-titled album released in 1994. Kylie Minogue is an Australian female pop star that originally started off as an actress before transitioning into one of the most iconic pop divas in history. She is so special to me. She is at this point a fixture in this channel, the way in which I have been steadily reviewing her projects for about 2 years now. In my last video, I reviewed her 1997 project Impossible Princess, and I thought I would go further back to the album before that, which is this, because I was incredibly flabbergasted at how different Kylie Minogue sounded in Impossible Princess compared to the albums that she would later release in the 2000s onwards. So I really wanted to answer this question of whether or not Impossible Princess was a complete 180 random pivot, or if this was a direction or a sound or a narrative that she was already toying with in the project before Impossible Princess was released. I was also listening to a lot of albums that were released in the 1990s, such as the Bjork album and the Alanis Morissette album, so I thought this would be a really good companion piece to that as well. In this album, there are definitely a lot more emotional low-tempo songs like Confide in Me and Surrender, which are kind of dripping with this pseudo-mystical sound that we do end up seeing a lot more of in Impossible Princess 3 years later. So I guess that does answer my question of whether or not she was already kind of playing with these musical aesthetics. So this album is not as dance focused as much, although there are 3-ish songs that you could argue are quite poppy or at least disco-y. The album definitely highlights a more contemplative side to Kylie that she will further explore in Impossible Princess. And as I said so in past videos, I usually look to Kylie for fun, luminous dance pop music and less so for these melancholic, emotional ballads or even for experimental alternative music. However, the songs in this album, as well as Impossible Princess, has definitely shifted my perception of her as an artist the more I sit with the music. For example, I am completely obsessed with Put Yourself in My Place. It has officially secured its spot in my official Kylie Classics playlist. I really love it. It really sold me on Kylie as a more like emotional, kind of tragic pop figure. And it took me a little too long to realize the double meaning of the lyrics. It's like, put yourself in my place, like understand my perspective of being the person whose heart got broken, as well as you're gonna put yourself in my place, as in the way that you are moving, you are gonna be left behind by someone you love, like me. Brilliant songwriting. I love it. No notes. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The other song that I thought was quite memorable from the album was Confide in Me, and I understand that's like I think that is the most popular song off the album. I initially did not vibe with it that much, although I did find it an incredibly compelling track. I think it's a very interesting track to lead the album with. It's such a stark contrast to, again, her usual pop dance persona sonically, but lyrics-wise, they are perfect for a female pop star. At this stage in her career, she had plenty of people throwing themselves at her feet already, although I doubt not quite what she could reach as her peak in the early 2000s with, Fever and etc. But this alluring siren song is exactly what a pop star diva is all about. She is beckoning the listener to trust her. She's inviting you to form basically this parasocial relationship between her as the singer and as a fan. Yes, you can argue that the more straightforward interpretation is that this is a love song, but I cannot really remove it from the context of like, Kylie is a pop star. I just think that was kind of really clever and sophisticated in the way she like comments on her position as a pop diva. She's actively encouraging you to obsess over her, saying that only she can understand your sorrows, your feelings, so you have to confide only in her. Once you do, you will feel so much better. And I just find it really, really fascinating. Like I said earlier, it wasn't like one of my favorite songs of the album, but I think because it was so impactful and because my growing interest in trip hop also allowed me to kind of gain a different appreciation or look at it from a different lens that way. So I think I actually listened to this voluntarily now. The other fun tracks of the album are Dangerous Game, Where Has the Love Gone, Time Will Pass You By, Where Is the Feeling. But I think aside from Put Yourself in My Place and Confide in Me, those are definitely the standouts of the album for me. I would put this album in Gems Found in the Mind for the very amazing tracks and a pretty fairly cohesive vision musically and lyrics wise. But in the grand scheme of things, I probably wouldn't consider this as like a go-to Kylie album, especially since, again, I've listened to quite a few of her albums at this stage in my discography dive now. And then I listened to Debut by Bjork. This was released in 1993. So Bjork is an Icelandic singer, songwriter, composer, record producer, and actress. I feel like you either know Bjork because you listen to a lot of music, or you've heard of Bjork because of people who do listen to a lot of music. Lots of memes circulating online about her avant-garde and eclectic style of music, and also just like general personality. Like I feel like I've seen that video of her beating up that reporter heaps of times. I am starting another discography dive alongside my Kylie Minogue and Madonna projects. I started with Bjork's debut to ease myself into her later works, which I'm aware is a little harder to digest, at least according to, music forums and the memes. I definitely found debut to be avant-garde, but still pretty approachable. Like, I get it, but also I don't like it. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think the album clicked with me, and I don't remember many of the songs, funnily enough. I'm not really sure what I was expecting with the album, actually, now that I think about it. There was only one song from the album that I knew before going into the album, which is Big Time Sensuality. And I enjoyed that song, and even after listening to the full album, I think it's still the best song out of the whole thing. I feel like there were many interesting ideas present in the album, in the same way that a mixtape or a demo could have many interesting ideas, but maybe not have an impactful execution. But that might just be because I genuinely didn't know what to expect, and I was neither surprised or disappointed or excited by what I found. I was like, okay, this is what it sounds like. Still though, I found a lot of it very interesting. It was maybe the first time I've been exposed to soundscapes like this, so I kind of appreciate it for what that does to me. My favorite songs are, as I said, Big Time Sensuality. I'll give you a little anecdote about how I discovered the song in the first place. So when I arrived in New Zealand for the first time as a 12-year-old, my dad took me and my sisters to an art gallery exhibit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. As we're moving through the rooms, the music video for Big Time Sensuality was projected onto a wall with a little blurb about Bjork. I don't remember reading the actual blurb. I do remember the music video and liking how the song sounds. So I liked it so much that I actually wrote down so that when I went home, I could look it up and listen to it in my spare time. So it's kind of interesting that I still remember. I definitely appreciate the song more now as an adult than I did as a, 12, 13-year-old. I also really like Venus as a Boy. I think this is kind of the best. Yeah, Big Time Sensuality and Venus as a Boy has my favorite vocal deliveries of Bjork. There's something so like effervescent and breathless in the way she delivers her lines. It's like this half singing, half moaning. Moaning isn't really the best word for it. Like exhaling. Yeah. It's very indescribable, very just light and ethereal. She sounds like a fairy. For that, I'm gonna put this in Gems Found in the Mind. Okay, guys, I gotta warn you ahead of time. This is gonna be very long. And I contemplated making a separate video just dedicated to this album, but I realized, I don't really want to deal with the attention that comes with it. If you don't care about Jennie, you gotta skip ahead. This is gonna be really long. Anyway, I listened to Ruby by Jennie. This was released in 2025. Jennie is I think, honestly, the most popular or the second most popular member of Blackpink. Blackpink is a K-pop idol girl group from South Korea. I purposefully did not put Jennie's name in the thumbnail or in the title of this video because I was overly cautious of her fan base finding my video and taking all of my criticisms in bad faith and accused me of spreading quote-unquote unnecessary Jennie hate. So I also didn't want to be accused of like clickbaiting or farming hate engagement because, spoiler alert, I do actually have a lot of criticisms about the album, which I, as a listener, am entitled to. So if you're a Jennie stan who found this video regardless of my, precautions, you cannot turn that against me. I am not trying to insert myself into discussions about Jennie. This is my channel. I'm posting my opinions. So if you are not ready to hear negative opinions about her work or her, performance, just click out of the video right now. Sorry, I just have to put that disclaimer in. And that being said, I actually really love the album, but everything that I love about the album is completely unrelated to Jennie as a singer or a rapper. In fact, the biggest criticism I have of the album is Jennie's, in my opinion, lackluster performance, which is all the more apparent set against the album's very incredible, very spectacular production. Production is the only word I can think of right now. So I've been a K-pop fan since 2015. So I was there when Blackpink debuted. I have talked about their music on my channel over the years, and my opinion of their music has definitely changed since then, which is completely normal as a listener of music. The more I expanded my music tastes, the more my standards change. So in the past, I was previously satisfied with how Jennie sounded in Blackpink songs. I wouldn't call myself a Blackpink fan. I wouldn't even call myself a casual listener of Blackpink. The style of music that they go for isn't really my cup of tea. But I couldn't really find anything meaningful to complain about Blackpink music. They kind of just did what they did, and that was fine. Of course, the more you listen to other people, the more you're exposed to stronger performances and stronger visions. So your expectations adjust. And I say all of this because I've listened to Rosé and Jisoo's work and have been sufficiently satisfied with them. I haven't talked about Rosé's album yet, but basically I didn't really enjoy the album, but I respected Rosé's vision for project. Jisoo's project I reviewed, I think 2 months ago. And I thought that even though it was short, it was clear that she wanted to sing a couple of songs and was not interested in stretching herself thin into a longer project if she didn't have anything else to say. Jisoo dropped a few songs and then dipped. I have yet to listen to Lisa's album yet, but I will eventually, so my commentary on Blackpink's solo career is still incomplete. But Jennie is kind of different given the way that she has conducted herself in her career post Blackpink as a brand ambassador, as an actress, as a model. And yeah, there was a lot of writing in this album. Hence why there was so much money invested in solo debut through music videos, choreography, and other promotional stuff. But mostly, in my eyes, through the slew of Grammy award-winning producers and songwriters working overtime to make this album the most perfectly polished it could possibly be. In my opinion, I think they definitely had a lot of strong cooks in the kitchen, and it shows, but at the same time, like, I think they did their best to create a cohesive project. At the same time, the album sounds like the global top 50 hits. You know, I can pinpoint which track is inspired by who. On one hand, it makes sense because the producers have worked with those people. So like Start a War sounds like a SZA track, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's because SZA is kind of in the zeitgeist right now. So I don't really blame them for tapping into that. But at the same time, I'm like, if I'm thinking of somebody else when I'm listening to your project, like, what does that say about you? Especially if this is your solo debut. I feel like I can't find anything about the album that is distinctly Jennie. I feel like I know more about Jennie after this album. Despite their best efforts of this facade of authenticity, I feel like the tracks cycle through this like sense of invincibility of like, yeah, I'm the it girl, I rule, you suck, etc. And vulnerability that on the surface shows duality to Jennie's persona as a pop star. But to me, the songs feel generic. I don't think they tell a larger or deeper story than quote unquote, sometimes I feel confident and sometimes I feel insecure. I think this restraint from Jennie stems from her 6 years of being a K-pop idol, which prioritizes this ultra perfect and detached performance that doesn't really leave a lot of room for grit and edge and I guess messiness. In this case, it's not really a matter of authenticity. I don't care if this is authentic to her. It's more like, how skillful are you at pretending that this is authentic to you? And personally, I don't really feel like she did a good job. Which brings me back to my earlier assessment that Jennie's performance feels like it's kind of just scratching the surface. I feel like she did the absolute bare minimum in the recording booth. It didn't bother me as much when she was in Blackpink because at the time, the songs that YG was giving them was mediocre enough that it wasn't really that hard for them to match or supersede the energy of the song. Also, for a long time, Jennie had been surrounded by other members in the songs with Lisa, Jisoo, and Rosé. So the weight of charisma, the burden of charisma could be distributed among the members. But now that Jennie is standing by herself and you flood the project with award-winning producers, the songs make it feel like she's actually falling behind. My gripe is that the vocals are too clean and polished. There's not really, again, not a lot of room for emotionality. Her delivery feels very one note, both in her singing and in her rapping. It's especially clear when she's put against the features on her tracks like Dua Lipa in Handlebars and Doechii in Extra L. In her rapping, there's just enough charisma to meet the bare minimum, but it's not flowing out of her like it is with Doechii. To me, it feels too restrained, and I really want her to meet the energy that the song has. It's like she's too afraid to sound messy or angry or human, which is kind of what Doechii does in the track. She sounds like a real person to me, whereas Jennie kind of just sounds like honestly, like AI generated. Like somebody fed like a lot of Blackpink songs through a software and it spat out Jennie's voice, which is not really a good sign. This is a great album, but not because of Jennie. This is a great album in spite of Jennie. I kept thinking about how much someone like Rihanna would have bodied this album, because just anyone who has edge, the bite, the charisma that the album deserves. Because when you have freaking Dem Joints, you know, and all these other people who've produced for Britney Spears, and you're kind of like, can you pick up the pace? So I feel like I'm in an interesting position because I am putting this in French toast despite so much of my criticisms laid onto the album, and that honestly feels right to me. Like, this is a really well done project, but obviously something is holding it back that keeps it from being at that very, very top. My favorite songs are Handlebars with Dua Lipa, hands down my absolute favorite. It is on repeat. I love it. I also really love Zen. When that song came out, I was shook. I was like, this could be a very interesting album. But at the same time, you could tell even then that Jennie was not meeting the threshold needed for a song like this. The song is so avant-garde and innovative and experimental and dark. And I'm like, why is Jennie just like reciting words at me? She's not like really embodying the song's vibe, in my opinion. I also really like start a war. I love the verses, but something about the chorus I actually kind of dislike. Maybe I think a lot of people have mentioned this. Extra L is a great single. I think having Doechii there is really awesome, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because Doechii is really amazing and then Jennie is kind of just there. If Extra L comes on the radio, I jam out to it, but it's not something that I go out of my way to listen to. Before I wrap up talking about Jennie, I need to address something. From the beginning of teasing her solo debut, I knew that Jennie was going to go really deep into a Western pop star image with a quote-unquote hashtag urban flair. I think the cultural appropriation and culture vulture discussions with this album is definitely a lot more nuanced given the amount of Black producers present in the project, alongside the Black stylists and the choreographers and the Black musicians featured in the album themselves. So I'm sure an actual Black K-pop fan living in the United States is probably a better leader in these discussions than I am, a Filipino living in New Zealand. But regardless, I just have to say that sometimes the use of the Black aesthetics and Black sound in the album just doesn't sit right with me. It never has, and I feel like I am allowed to feel discomfort and voice my concerns at the commercial sanitized version of Black culture being superimposed on a conventionally beautiful Korean woman who herself has not lived in the United States and therefore has no concrete claim to the styles that she is taking inspiration from. But what do I know? As Jennie says, you sit too far down on them charts to even ask who's in charge. And to that, I end my extremely long rant about the Jennie album. And then I listened to For Emma Forever Ago by Bon Iver. This was released in 2008. Bon Iver is an American indie folk band founded in 2006 by singer-songwriter Justin Vernon. I decided to listen to this album because I have never listened to a full Bon Iver album before, and I wanted to listen to a previous full album before getting invested in the album that he released this year. It is also his debut album, so I thought it would be an interesting exercise to compare Bon Iver's first release with his latest release. And last but not least, this era of Bon Iver is really the strongest in my imagination. The songs off the album were super popular back in Tumblr, with songs like Skinny Love and The Wolves being a frequent lingering guest on my timeline. Sonically, this album is kind of something you get depending on your mood and the weather, if not an acquired taste. If you're not in the mood for sad, folky, whisper singing, I really don't think there's anything for you here. However, if you want to live out your Bella and Twilight Saga fantasy, looking out the window while you deliberate whether you want Edward or Jacob, or even if it's a rainy autumn afternoon, you should jump straight into this project. I really enjoyed this. Maybe it depends on when I listen to this because again, it really depends on my mood. I still think the standout songs were Skinny Love and The Wolves, with The Wolves being I think my personal favorite, but I also enjoyed the tracks Blindsided, For Emma, Team, and Regarding Stats. Overall, a very solid album. I'm putting this in French toast. And lastly, I listened to FE304 Forward by NMIXX. This was released in 2025. NMIXX is a K-pop girl group that debuted in 2020. They are joined again by the legendary producer Dem Joints, who is a very well-established producer and is always in high demand. But the fact that he has two high-profile artists in his pocket at the same time, he really highlights how well-established he is as an artist. It's incredible how he manages to juggle these two artists while staying to the style of those artists but still kind of sounding like a Dem Joints production. I really enjoyed this. I usually would give like projects like these some flack for being just a collection of random songs that the girls sound great in and don't really have an overarching narrative. This is a kind of critique I gave Yeji earlier, but because the tracks are so amazing, I feel like they kind of make up for the fact that there's no like particular story or overarching narrative that ties all of the tracks together as far as I'm aware. I think the difference, for example, with this EP and Yeji's is that the eclecticness of the sonic styles that NMIXX are experimenting with feel very intentional and justified because it's almost like they're showing off how well they can mold themselves into these different genres because they're all in a way kind of different, but at the same time they all really match the tone or like a vibe that they're going for. Like in order of how much I love the songs, I would say my favorite song is Papillon, followed by High Horse, and then Know About Me, Ocean, Golden Recipe, and then Slingshot. I love Papillon. It feels like an espresso shot straight to the veins. It's electrifying. It's exhilarating. The soundtrack to a sci-fi movie. Like it's some really really cool. I really like it. It's like I've never seen The Matrix, but this is what I imagine like being in The Matrix sounds like. I think it's like song of the year material. And I also really like High Horse. Like when my friend told me that High Horse was a trip hop song, I almost like didn't believe him. And then I listened to it and I was like, this is trip hop, is it not? I feel so glad and just like I knew in my heart that I couldn't give up on trip hop, and I just had to keep looking because deep down I knew that I would eventually find a trip hop song or a trip hop like style that I could like, and High Horse ended up being kind of my reward for pursuing that journey or that hunt, because it's the exact flavor of trip hop that I think I could definitely get behind. Now, to be fair, I think getting some like trip hop experience / practice before listening to High Horse has definitely helped me reach that point. You could argue that I've been prepped to digest this track better because I've already listened to actual trip hop staples like Mezzanine, Dummy, Debut, and even Impossible Princess to a certain extent. So on the other hand though, you could argue, like, again, I'm still not an expert on trip hop, but you could argue that this is definitely maybe a more watered down version of what trip hop is. Like when you compare the song to like songs like when you compare the song from like songs from Dummy or Mezzanine, like I still feel like Mezzanine and Dummy are so much more confrontational and a lot more like anxiety inducing than High Horse is. To me, High Horse is so wistful, romantic. You could also argue that I already have formed a particular bias for the NMIXX girls' voice because I've been listening to them for so long. So really a perfect combination of a lot of things that have led me to really loving High Horse. And I think this is kind of like a stepping stone for me to like further appreciate other trip hop songs that don't necessarily sound like they're in the same vein. Another thing that I find funny is that I don't know if it's because I'm actively searching for trip hop or if like there is something brewing within pop music right now, but I feel like trip hop is gonna become the next thing. You know how the past couple of years it was, you know, UK garage / two-step. It was liquid drum and bass for a while, you know, that kind of sound. I feel like trip hop is gonna return to the limelight in a way that maybe we haven't seen since the 90s. You know, it'll be like palatable trip hop, like commercial trip hop, which I think will be very interesting. Addison Rae released headphones on and I just got around to like listening to it, and not gonna lie, I'm kind of obsessed. So I think like that alongside High Horse has really helped me understand my personal taste when it comes to trip hop as a genre. So that's been really interesting. Moving on to the third track of the album that I really, really loved, which is their title track, Know About Me. I think it's really unique and super fresh, super forward thinking. It's something that I feel like would have been relegated to a B-side because it's a little bit more laid back and it's not particularly on your face. It's catchy, but not in the way that pop songs usually are. So I kind of really like that because it's so different to what all the other groups are doing. The song still manages to stay consistent with NMIXX's overall musical identity, which I think is really cool. Ocean and Golden Recipe, I kind of like the same amount, and the way I feel about them can be interchangeable. Slingshot is probably like my least favorite song, hands down. Like the difference between the songs above it is like a very significant difference. Slingshot sounds like an NCT Dream song, which is neither a critique nor a compliment. It's just an observation, and it's like Dem Joints has produced for NCT Dream, and so it's almost like I kind of wish they took it out of the album. Like I don't think Slingshot needed to be there, but I think they put it in there because like beef up like the NMIXX project. But like at the end of the day, the best songs are the ones that I just said. So we have one dud out of, you know, the rest of the album. I would say this is one of the best projects that the year has to offer. So I'm going to put this in your endless material. So that's all I listened to in April. Here is a pie chart of the decades of albums that I have listened to so far. And that concludes this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. I know this is kind of a different format, but this was kind of just the best I could do given my circumstances right now. I'd love to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on the projects that I have talked about in the video. And if you have any recommendations, let me know. I'd love to listen to them. You want to see more of my work, you are welcome to subscribe if you haven't already. My social media links are down in the description alongside my Patreon and Coffee pages if you want to support me financially. Otherwise, I can't wait to share my love with you again next time. I will see you guys soon. Bye!